Hello, welcome to the People Profit Podcast, the show where we flip the script on traditional business thinking and prove that when you put people first, profits follow. I'm Sandra Coker, your guide on this journey to more engaged teams, loyal customers, and a healthier bottom line. These episodes are brought to you by Human Power Solutions, helping organizations unlock the human potential that powers performance. Whether you're a leader, an HR pro, or a curious change maker, buckle up. We're diving into fresh stories, real-world strategies, and a few laughs along the way. Ready to turn your workplace into a profit-powered people machine? Let's get started. I am absolutely thrilled to have as my guest today, Amy Mosher Berry. She is the CEO of Visions Internships and the founder and host of the annual Career and Leadership Conference for purpose-driven young professionals. Amy started her company in 2020. Yes, I said 2020. After seeing too many of her college students graduating with zero real-world experience and hearing too many of her friends and colleagues asking if she could just hook them up with a good intern. While Vision Internship primarily helps organizational leaders set up and run impactful internship programs without all the stress, they also empower young professionals with the skills and the support to succeed. Amy is a passionate social entrepreneur and intergenerational workforce expert with over 20 years of diverse experience in business, government, and nonprofit sector, including her 15 years of workforce innovation and 5 years teaching college. She's a certified project management professional, PMP, with a master's degree in community development and planning and a bachelor's degree in environmental studies in Spanish. We are so excited to have you here today, Amy. I've known you for a few years now, so really just would love to, kind of chit-chat about a little bit about, your journey, because you've gone from your blue collar upbringing in Central Mass to moving to Texas, back to Central Mass, teaching in classrooms. You've had so many different iterations of your life. I'm just so interested to have this conversation with you. So,
Well, Sandy, thank you so much. And for your leadership and vision. I know every time we chat, we could talk for another 5 hours. So I just really appreciate you and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I was excited. I think because we've known each other for such a long time and, we have kids and we've been through divorce, we've been through it all, right? And I think it's interesting because what your niche is and where you work is where a lot of HPS's passion is. But I'd really like to start off with you and really kind of have the audience get to know you a little bit better. Your story starts in Central Mass, right? Then you have a sudden move to East Texas at the age of 15, which I can't imagine, and then back again. Quite a whirlwind for that teenage life. Right? Can you take us to a moment in that transition when you realize that, your perspective on leadership is shifting?
Oh my goodness. Well, what the heck did I know at 15 at all? So that was so formative for me at that particular age. I was riding high, doing my thing. I went to Algonquin Regional High School here in Central Massachusetts. So definitely, in, the boroughs, Worcester County is the home turf. And my dad was like, we're moving to East Texas. And I was like, what do you mean? It was early April of my freshman year. I was I was Juliet in the freshman play. We had just won a state championship in my sport. And I was like, I think my dad, not all there. What's going on? He's like smiling faces, open spaces. He also had family down there. And at that time, believe it or not, it's a funny thing. I'm 46 now and he was 46 when he retired from both of his main field was ironworking. And so it was a very dangerous profession. So he was an iron worker as well as a Marine. He was in the Corps for 26 years. I'm also the daughter of a sergeant major, which may inform the viewers a little bit, things that I thought were normal. I remember my mom was to my dad, why don't our kids know, Mary had a little lamb, twinkle, twinkle. We walked around from the halls of Moctus. We were these weirdos, my dad would, we would watch March in formation. I'm the middle child, and we'd be in my dad's gear just because it was so novel to even see the guy who was gone so much. And, we thought it was great to march around the house. He'd be like, Eddie's, we'd be like, and it was like normal, a lot of like funny things when I look back, I'm like, that probably, whatever the heck normal is, that probably wasn't it. But I mean, I just feel like, when I moved to Texas, it was extremely eye-opening because where it was 80 miles east of Dallas, and I was in a very small town. They had never heard of Massachusetts. They called it Massachusetts. They didn't know what I was talking about. They hadn't yet taken U.S. history, and I thought I was on another planet. And I joke, I'm like, the place I could understand more what was happening was in Spanish class because the accent wasn't so intense. And there's just so many things to say there. I actually did write my college essay on it. But I mean, if there's anything in particular you'd like to ask me, feel free. But that's like a whole conversation over wine, Sandy.
Yeah, that's really, so how do you think that shaped, that's a huge transition, as you just said. And, you're uprooted from everything that and we both grew up in New England. So we have a certain way of life around here, a certain way of being. So when you look back, and we'll talk a little bit more, obviously, about your career path and how windy it's been. I guess that's a good word, right? Windy?
Windy, love that. Zigzag. Yes.
But how did that shape you? You're the CEO of a company. So my husband is a ex-combat vet, and we've been married for a couple of years, and it's fairly regimented, in our home, which is fine. Yeah. So how does that upbringing and that background, affect how you lead now and how you run your company?
So I come from sort of like a less than religious, but sort of mixed religious background. And my dad is of Irish, English, Catholic descent. And my mom is essentially Ukrainian Jew descent. So we were living in a place where they weren't familiar really with either of those. And then the combination appeared like it was a threat in the neighborhood. So finally somebody had come over. I will never forget this. This was part of my college essay. Just give me the hook if this is TMI. But basically, there I was in the foyer. We were like, oh, there's neighbors coming over. They had a plate of cookies, and the woman looked very friendly. She had her, holding her daughter's hand. And she said, welcome, please come to our church. And my dad said, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. We love meeting our neighbors. That's not going to work out because my wife is Jewish. I'm Catholic. And we don't really do that here. It was a particular kind of like Southern Baptist. God bless them. Yeah. I mean, like, do your thing. She dropped the plate of cookies. They flew across the tile, and I was starting to pick up the cookies, like thinking she had tripped, or there was, like the cookies fell. I didn't know that then she like took her child, and that was it. We never spoke to them again. There was a lot of buzz around the neighborhood, and we were officially the aliens. So it was just one of those, like, I didn't know that was a thing until I did.
Wow. So, that's a pretty powerful experience.
It was. Yeah. And I'm always like, try to label me. Like, just go ahead. It's hilarious. Like, so many different things. I also, I'm like, I also happen, my partner, we speak Spanish fluently. I mean, I've traveled. I haven't always had a lot of money in the bank, but I've always taken risk and traveled internationally. I mean, I've done a lot of adventurous things, I think, especially being a Sagittarius. So I've taken a lot of that. I love learning about people and where they come from. And, let's get in their world and speak their language and eat their food. I love learning and just being super open-minded and interested. And I've learned, Sandy, in leadership and in business and life, it's much more effective and, to me, fun, enjoyable to be interested rather than interesting. So I think that's super insightful. Let's stop worrying about being so interesting. Does everybody like agree or get me? It's like, who cares? Let me just be interested. And that by itself is interesting because I think the world could use a little bit more people that are authentically interested, including people that may actually be different than them. Like, bring it on. Yeah.
And I think that's such an important thing for everyone to, and young, old, whatever, good lessons for people to learn. I kind of want to go to, you go to college. So you came back for college?
Let's see. So I was like the kid that was voted onto the college island. Like, we didn't come from a college going family. Nobody really had a sense of what that was about. But there was this general sense of one of us got to college, like we were going to make it, whatever that meant. So yeah, I did. I went to University of Vermont, go Catamounts. And, I was looking for a particularly interesting combination. So I was pretty much obsessed. I needed to do environmental studies because I thought it was my particular role to save the planet. Take a look around, see how that's gone. But so environmental studies, Spanish in Vermont, which I used to joke there was like 5 Spanish speaking people in Vermont in the 90s. And maybe there's a little bit more. But so I did that combination. And then I also pursued gymnastics at the college level. And that was a really interesting mix. But yeah, I did go to college for the 4 years. I do believe being part of an organized sport, even though I had gotten injured early on, which affected a lot of my game plan, right? Again, there's the plan and then how it goes. But I do believe that being part of that sort of organization actually helped me stay in college because I felt like I was part of a larger community and I had that sort of sense of family, but I was always very entrepreneurial and questioning and like, is college even a thing for me? And I just didn't see myself as like kind of an academic lifer. That's why it was sort of ironic and funny that after college, I did AmeriCorps during the year of 9/11. And I was in kind of the right place at the right time. And I was able to pursue my master's at Clark after that. So it's just funny because I didn't necessarily see that coming, but that's life. It's sort of zigzag and as we said, we roll.
So when you talk about the injury, right? So you those setbacks, as a college athlete, breaking your foot, you spoke about finding silver linings. How did that injury shape the way you think about risk and resilience, both personally and as you guide others?
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a great question. So in terms of how I perceive risk, and I'll just say something about, and it's not so unique to gymnastics, but there is an element that is sort of unique. And a lot of people are like, oh, is your daughter doing gymnastics? I'm like, I hope not. But one of the things that I appreciate about the sport is like, there's no halfway. You don't do half a back handspring on high beam or an aerial. You will kill yourself. Like you're all in. So it's like, and something about coaching. I was just sharing with another business colleague, friend of mine, and we're using this analogy. It's like sometimes, the best coaches, they believe in their coachee or their mentee, as it were, before the person, him or herself. It's like, the best coaches, it's almost like the coachee, the person being coached must suspend his or her disbelief and sort of borrow the coaches or the mentors, right, in the workplace, belief in him or herself to like go for it, go full on. So, it doesn't really matter exactly the what happened in terms of the injury, but I did break my foot. It was on beam, which was like that's why I was recruited, beam floor. And it was very humbling. All of a sudden, I couldn't do the thing that I was recruited to do. And it felt like it really altered my identity. Like I was like, I'm here for this. It's like, oh yeah, I'm here for school too. But when you're 18, 19, it's like you have that like kind of warped perspective on things. You don't realize how important other things are. And so when that was sort of taken from me, it was outside of my control, even though I think a lot of us tend to self-diagnose. We're like, oh, we're okay. But no, really, you have to slow down or you're going to not be able to walk or use a critical body part. So I kind of got that memo and I explored things, Sandy, that I wouldn't have made the time to do. And I happen to remember I got very involved in something called UVM against sweatshop labor. So as you may recall, in the 90s, there was a lot of sort of revelations around how our clothing and footwear were produced. And I was concerned about that, not only the environmental impact, but especially the impact on human beings. And so I got very involved in that. And I was able to kind of use a little bit of my leverage as an athlete to talk to some of the people higher up about, let's vote with our feet. Let's make sure that our values are in alignment, that we're not just sort of like blindly making the best purchases, that we actually choose to see and care about the connections. So I sort of took more leadership in that and various other extracurricular activities, other service, community service, things that I just probably wouldn't have made time for if I had gotten injured.
I think that's awesome. A lot of times when you feel like you're sidelined and you're just not sure and things just kind of find you and your passion starts to come alive. And but what I loved was hearing you talk about the coach and now the coach believes in you before you do. My granddaughters, they're both in cheer, and my older one is like, that back handspring or that back whatever, that flip or whatever they do. The coach is like, it is that encouragement, and you can watch the belief. Yeah. And I think young professionals in our workplace right now need to find those mentors and those coaches.
Totally.
Because there's not a lot of that going on right now. When you think about these things, you often refer in the inevitable gap between what we want and what life delivers. And we've heard a couple of your stories already. Can you share a recent example from your Vision Internships world that maybe a pivot or a challenge, and how you led yourself and your team through that gap?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, the biggest, most obvious gap that I wasn't sure if my company was going to survive it, to be totally honest now looking back. So we had, as you mentioned, I launched the company 2020. I will always have my young people to thank. So it was primarily, as you mentioned in the bio, my young people that I kept seeing just systematically graduating, no real world experience, didn't know what they were doing. The debt was piled up, super stressful. And so I put so much effort, and I have no regrets, but early on, it was all about the work-ready intern. And I overlooked the need for the intern-ready organization.
Okay, so talk a little bit about that.
So there will always be young people that are, and despite popular belief, young people for the most part are incredibly motivated to make a huge difference. They are purpose-driven, right? So there will always be young people that are going to be hungry and rise to the occasion and figure it out, get that experience, stretch. They do appreciate being mentored and having guidance and feedback. That's really important. I think that's often misunderstood as perhaps lack of work ethic or not wanting to work, which is not accurate. So I really get and appreciate their perspective, but I just started to see that so many companies weren't actually ready to work with young people at that level. And remember, as you know, Sandy, being in, the sort of HR realm leadership, young people who are considered interns, and I won't get into all the jargon here, but there's a lot of alphabet soup around a lot of these terms. We need to remember from the business perspective, interns really do need to add value to the organization. Otherwise, already stretched managers, especially since COVID, where supervisors, managers have a hard enough time keeping track of their current skilled and experienced paid staff. So where does that leave the less than experienced young person who may be hungry and want to add value, but they're off the radar, especially with a lot of these hybrid and even still fully remote. So we really just sort of said, let's make it easier and God forbid fun for managers who are already so stretched. Let's make fun and functional for them to actually have an impactful, a customized internship program that meets their goals. And it's okay to say ROI, return on investment, but you can't just leave it there. You actually have to be aware of the federal and by extension state guidelines that shape and define internships. You can't just say, it's only ROI. There are criteria that legally must be followed, especially if it's a for-profit not paying intern. So there's just a lot to unpack and make it easier and fun and simple for the busy leader to meet their goals, whether they need, most leaders, they know they have consistent project support needs. That wouldn't it be nice to have some interns? And they do have a longer term, even if they don't know if they can hire right now because of the level of uncertainty, they like the idea of building a talent pipeline. And I actually wrote a recent blog on this, Sandy, that in times of high uncertainty, ironically, it's one of the best possible times to focus on investing in a structured internship program because by definition, those leaders are not going to have to make that long-term financial commitment. It's in their best interest to structure project-based internship arrangements, having a long-term internship vision that's part of their long-term growth strategy because it's inherently low risk.
And as well as I do, we've been in a lot of companies that, we're in business because a lot of companies are having a hard time, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that many managers, executives don't realize, that it actually has to be structured. So many, aside from your CPA firms and those that they live and breathe with the interns, other companies, manufacturing, all those kind of areas that you wouldn't think could utilize an intern. It would be great for them to be able to understand what that structure looks like and to be able to really utilize them. So I love that.
pivot. It was like essential. And I look back, but here's the other thing that I want to say, and hopefully this is a contribution to people that may be listening. At the same time that I had this massive pivot, I said, oh my gosh, if we don't focus more on B2B and helping the organizations set up and run a great internship program without all the stress, there won't be any opportunities. There won't be the option to connect young people. There won't be anything viable to connect them to really for the long haul. At the same time that I was like, oh man, that is a big pivot to go essentially from primarily B2C to B2B, serving the businesses. Same moment, of course, my dear beloved mother is now, and I knew she was terminally ill, but things really took a pretty bad turn. She eventually did pass at the end of 2023. And again, well, that wasn't desired or easy at all, right? And keep in mind that my daughter, who's now 8, she was 6 when she found out, and she lost her very close Grammy. And just 4 months after my mom passed, my stepdad passed. And that was my daughter's second home, essentially, right? In addition to her dad, who lives up in New Hampshire as well, and his family, thank goodness for them. Yeah. But that was a massive meltdown. Just that alone, making sure my daughter was mentally and spiritually and physically okay to handle that transition while I was going through a major business pivot and realized not only am I upgrading and tweaking major services here, I am also doing all of the back end systems and funnels and automations that I know we've been through that together. So that was the same time while I'm mourning my mother, I'm doing internal systems and totally upgrading services. And people were probably like, what the heck happened to Amy? But I was able to kind of keep it going. And, now I'm just in the process where people are starting to say, oh, I get it. They're actually Visions Internships. We are out to help the right 2 to 4 people inside a company set up and run a great internship program. And P.S., because Amy refuses to give up entirely on serving young people, against some of my advisors' wishes. I've literally lost certain advisors because they're like, you just have to go with the companies. I said, if I just go with the companies, I will probably lose motivation. So I need even 20% of my time needs to go to direct impact and service to young people. And you're right, 80% of our effort and capacity needs to be channeled in terms of smart business to supporting companies. But I won't give up entirely on the young people, which is why we do the annual conference. And we have, a kind of casual virtual network of sorts supporting young people. But it's really allowed me to, not give up on the key audience I want to serve, but to do it in a way that I can actually sustain it as the CEO. I'm still the only full-time person that works for my company, and we are growing. And it's a huge juggle, as I know you know personally, because I know we started our companies around the same time, which has been really fun to be on the journey.
It really has been.
Running a business is hard. Developing your people shouldn't be. At Human Power Solutions, we act as your outsourced chief learning officer, designing custom learning and development experiences that actually move the needle. No fluff, no cookie cutter workshops, just results. Whether your people need better communication, stronger leadership, or less burnout, we provide strategic solutions that align with your goals and keep your team moving forward. Visit hpowersolutions.com and unlock your team's full potential without disrupting operations.
I think you said something really powerful there, and I'm going to, and you said a lot of powerful things, but the fact that you didn't say yes, that, we're just going to focus 100% on the company. Was your passion why you started, was your passion. And I think a lot of times when we start companies and we start to grow and get everything set up, kind of lose our passion sometimes. And I think it's really important that you did do that and that you were like, nope, I started this for a reason. I know business-wise I've got to do this, but I know I want to impact here. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. And Sandy, you would probably agree that, what's not been working, especially since COVID, is the disconnect between today's employers and our young professionals. So I feel like if I were to just have sort of said, okay, makes more sense for a lot of reasons to focus exclusively on the businesses, that's perpetuating what's already not working.
Exactly.
So I'm gosh darn it, especially, being a founder, it's like, no, I'm going to, like, if you don't know where you stand, you can fall for anything. I said, no, I am going to make sure we're delivering on something that's missing in the marketplace, which is by extension, a direct business benefit. The employers are happy that I am supporting all these young people because guess what? They're more of a vetted talent pool that they could eventually draw from in a way that benefits them without putting undue pressure on employers. They're like, oh, Amy's got people. So I want to continue supporting them in a way that works for the young people and the employers. And without me doing that, the employers would have to just be on their own. And I would be guiding them. Of course, there's, you've got to make sure that they have the right source of talent for that particular company. So that's part of the work we do in the Internship Insider, which is our core service for companies.
Yeah.
But it helps to have that additional pool of young people that are excited and they're being trained and they feel supported, right? Like, and they can be recommended because we know them.
But, and that's the thing, like you can set up these great programs, but if you don't have the right talent, I mean, I think it's the best of both worlds.
I know. Look who I'm talking to. I'm preaching the converted girl. You don't need me to tell you that.
Let's talk a little bit about philosophy, right? You describe your style as transformational, servant, and democratic leadership. So those are, there's a lot of different things in there. Tell us about the time when those three approaches just kind of collided. And how did you decide which one to lean into?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Well, I think probably the best example that's right in my face is for almost 7 months now, I've been leading an effort to pull off this annual career and leadership conference for purpose-driven young professionals. And that is not just me running that. There's no way I could do all of that. So huge shout out to my mainly volunteer planning committee. We have 5 young professionals on the planning committee and then a bunch of mentors. So 4 other mentors, and some of whom are actually involved in your network, the Human Power Solutions, our mutual chamber. So I think in terms of that whole approach to planning something big and important is like really asking, I started asking back in November and December to some of the young people in my network and also people that care about young people, serve young people, employ young people. What are the struggles now? Like, what are young people facing that they could use that additional support? And my young people led the way in literally identifying what are some of the program topics that they themselves and their friends could use the support. So I'm super proud of that. I love, asking the very people that we're out to serve, what is it that they really want and need, or where are they struggling? This is a safe space. Please feel like you can say, and I'm not asking them to speak for all young people, but they do have a unique insight. Sometimes I think I'm still a young professional, whatever the heck that, guys, I'm not anybody's age czar. But we're talking generally that 18 to 29-ish, but there are certainly young people in their 30s. People are always kind of figured out, but let's ask the people that we're saying we're creating this conference for purpose-driven young professionals. Well, what the heck do they want and need? Where are they struggling? Where do they want to rise that they don't necessarily feel like they have the support or the know-how or the role models? They want to see, and I'm going to break out my and sign if you guys are wondering, this looks a little fuzzy in the back. But we're all about showing young people how we can, in fact, do well and do good. So it's not either or. And Sandy, I did not get that memo until I was in my mid-30s. I did not know I could do well for myself, professionally, financially, and do good work in the world, helping people, helping planet. I thought I had to pick one. And that was a huge struggle. And when I taught college, I realized it was a similar, although more nuances to it 20 years later, very similar mindset. And I still sort of see that now. So I feel like it's hearing from who we say we're out to serve, kind of getting out of the way, letting them make recommendations. I mean, I had a few recommendations for speakers that were sort of knocked out because other people say, what, I think this is more of what we need. I'm like, great. So let's do that instead. And to let people lead in ways that I wouldn't necessarily lead is probably one of the biggest things I've learned is looking at how I might do it and being willing to step aside and say, what, we don't even know what's on the other side of someone else's creation. Let's see. Let's co-create this and we'll see. So I know those were a few different leadership philosophies in one. And I don't know if we're going to talk about this idea of participatory facilitation, whether I'm working with my committee or I know I've done certain trainings for some of your clients, but I do believe that, which is the more democratic sort of, approach, I'd say, to leadership, that I think is probably one of my greatest skill sets, and I enjoy because I really get to, like, I create a space where everyone feels comfortable and confident enough to kind of play in the sandbox and participate. And just by my commitment to what I call participatory facilitation, it alters the whole dynamic. So people don't feel like they're being talked at. They're being, they're in a conversation. I know I'm doing a lot of talking right now. I'm obviously passionate about the issue, but definitely letting people just be comfortable and confident in their own skin, and however they want to participate, fantastic. And being open to that and making sure people feel okay. There's no wrong way to participate.
And I think that's definitely that's the HPS philosophy. It's collective wisdom, and it's, not talking death by PowerPoint, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One thing that, and coming back to that, so I have that young professional. I've got my 25-year-old who's in corporate America, and my 27-year-old who's in corporate America. And luckily, they call me for different advice. And they're like, I had a conversation yesterday with my son. And one of the things that I just said to him, I go, you got to talk about facts versus your feelings. Right.
Okay.
So I'm like, because the tolerance for feelings for people my age who are CEOs is very low. And that's unfortunate. But, and it's really, it's trying to help these young people navigate my generation, your generation, right?
Yeah.
Because those leaders aren't the nicest leaders. Sorry, but they're not. And I think it's really to help them craft an internship program and show the value of what this next generation is bringing to the workplace.
Right.
It is going to really change the dynamics, I think, of the workplace. And I hear it all the time, but, you talk about your company values. I mean, well-being, opportunity, results, kindness, right? That's not just wall art for you. Right. So choose one. Let's say kindness. How have you baked that into a day-to-day decision or your process at Vision Internships?
Well, yeah, thank you for asking. And for those of you who may know me, I love acronyms. So my, company values stands for work, as Sandy said, well-being, opportunity, results, and kindness. And to just dig into the kindness bit that you asked about. So, I mean, I think, with my most recent team member, meaning somebody that's like on my part-time staff, who lives in Connecticut, and we hadn't met in person yet. And I took the time out. I had a few days off where it was over April vacation. So my daughter was sorted with her dad, and I was visiting a friend in New York. I had a few work-related meetings in New York anyways. So it wasn't like out of my way, but I really made it a point to meet with my new team member in person, to take her out to lunch, to just give her as much time as she wanted to talk. And she was blown away. She could not believe that I took that much time out of my, time off. And time off, time with my people. You get that. We had an epic conversation, and our work relationship has improved drastically. She has this incredible appreciation. She's informed me over, that she feels comfortable. She's so happy to work with me and for me because I appreciate who she is. There are certain cultural holidays that she was afraid to tell me about. And I was like, absolutely. Let me know please teach me a little bit more about Eid. I would love to learn. Thank you so much for telling me that this is important to you, and let's, school each other. So she was just I have goosebumps just thinking about how grateful she is and how much she appreciates that I appreciate her. And I think one of the things I had mentioned, and it's not my quote, but I love it so much, you've probably heard, what we appreciate appreciates. So that to me is that kindness in action. And then you say, and Sandy, I do got your book. I've been reading your book myself. We love it. And it was so fun to go to your, congratulations again on the book. I know it was a big feat, a lot of effort, and it was a pleasure to go to your kickoff event here live in Westboro. But a lot of what you talk about is so similar. And I feel like I'm so fortunate you are my friend, and we're in, we collaborate as well through HPS and other things, because I feel like our synergy is so natural and so powerful and strong. I feel like so much of what you stand for, I stand for as well. And it feels very affirming, especially being a full-time entrepreneur. And, it is like a solopreneur when you're still, I'm still as I mentioned, my team is growing and it's still on me. The expression, it can feel lonely at the top, whatever the heck that means. But it's so wonderful being part of a community, of a network like with you, that like these are common values shared. And so much of what your book highlighted, I feel like gave me even more confidence to lead the way that I do. So thank you for that. I love it. And I kind of use it as a reference as well. So
Thank you.
out your book. Yes, I would love it. Other people, if you haven't read it, guys, and it's like, what's other people's version of people profit? Like people can define that in all of their own ways. But I feel like, especially with my, team member that I mentioned, they're literally like speaking what works for them. And when you align with what works for them, like you've said so many times, Sandy, I've heard you talk, and in the book, the company benefits so drastically and quantitatively that it's almost like, what are we even like? Are we really trying to like push a point here? It's just the math.
Right. Yes.
No.
It's fine. When you talk about leading in that manner, people are like, oh, I never really thought about that. It's very interesting. But let's circle back to that lunch. What?
Yeah.
That lunch, right?
It's all about the food, Sandy.
Right. That's when you and I first met over food. I think on the porch,
Totally.
Right? But what did that do for her performance? Your company. So talk about that.
So I think probably what shifted the most is she got that I trusted her judgment. And there was a lot of like, Amy, do you approve this? Are you okay with this? Before that luncheon. And I've told her, I said, we need to stick to our basic processes. So if it's like sort of a new concept or copy, I just need to kind of look over, we'll still go through our project management system. She'll tag me. I'll give an approval, great job. Thank you. Good to go. Green light. But she's definitely like much more proactive because she trusts that I trust her judgment. And I think that was the biggest shift. So she feels, it's like she's just, even in our Zoom sessions, it's like she's, like sitting up straighter. She's so excited to see me and give me an update or ask a question. I think she was a little bit even nervous to ask questions before. And now she knows like, well, of course, Amy leads with kindness. Like, I want to know, what do you need? Let's go.
Yeah, I love it. I love that so much. So thinking about this intergenerational workforce, which I just, love, and you're an expert in this whole field. What's one blind spot you see on both sides, the young professional and the seasoned colleagues, when it comes to collaborating? And what recommendations would you give to both sides to bridge that divide?
I love that. Thank you so much. And I do want to give a shout out to Nichols College, who I know you've worked with as well. They're going to be hosting an intergenerational workforce summit that I am leading with some of the people at Nichols. That's going to be August 6th. So we're going to be covering a lot of these different pieces. Nice. But I love that question. Like, what is sort of the blind spot, and perhaps a recommendation from one to the other? So, it is amazing. As we know, we used to say 4 generations in the workforce, but really if we consider the traditionalists, which are the 1925 to 1945 folks, pre-boomer, there's technically 5 generations, because a lot of people in their 70s, God bless them, they're coming back sometimes out of retirement. They're serving on boards. They're in the workplace and they have so much to offer, whether or not they're somebody's direct supervisor. So it's important to acknowledge that there are 5 generations. And with AI and other technologies, when we talk about generations, just the whole concept of generations is shifting dramatically as well. Like, so things are sort of like, it may not be the 20 years that we've sort of typically looked at. It may very well, because of different advances in technology and things we haven't even sort of seen yet, those definitions are shifting, we'll say. So in terms of what I think I want to start first with what young professionals are wanting and is often missing. At least that's their perception. And then we'll go to more of the employer side, regardless of the generation. So young people today are, and it's statistically backed up. There were studies done. I know part of what compelled me to start my company in 2019 was a national study done by Gallup and Bates College, and they looked at the purpose gap. So so many employers today are literally missing the purpose gap. And if they were to really acknowledge it and recruit and retain based on what this means, they would probably be less stressed out and be dealing with less turnover. And it's essentially that over 80% of today's college graduates here in the US are seeking so-called purposeful work. So they're looking to help people, help planet in a meaningful way. They're looking for meaningful versus menial work. And we all know there's always an element of menial work, even if it's, we say 20%, which early on, I mean, that might even be like, generous in that direction. There's always stuff that we may not want to do. And that's part of life, right? Right. Well, I don't need to break out the ensign, but they're really looking to make a difference and make money. They're looking for paycheck with a purpose.
Yeah.
And for employers to overlook that, young people are, in numbers, and I'm talking young people that even hold a college degree, think of all the time and money they put in, and they're going back to their barista and babysitter jobs because they're not finding companies that are necessarily aligned in purpose. Yep. So the employers who, by the way, are already doing purposeful work, let's give our employers a really big acknowledgement. So many organizations, whether you're for-profit or nonprofit, you do not need to be a nonprofit to be doing social impact work or being socially and environmentally conscious. Very much so in the for-profit realm, but they're not necessarily focusing on it sufficiently, and so they're losing or missing young people that are more overtly looking for this. And so employers do need to close that purpose gap to be more effective in reaching, connecting with, and attracting and retaining to these young professionals. So I think the purpose gap, I think you guys got my drift. That's another whole conversation. There's a lot more to it, but let's now look at like the young people and what they may be missing from the employer's perspective. And honestly, it's sort of connected to the purpose gap. It's like, as I mentioned, there's not every single thing we do is going to be, so rich and meaningful all the time. There are certain things that just need to get done. So I think that piece that the, young people, in addition to the purpose gap, they want flexibility and autonomy, and they want their employers to trust them to do the work. But I think the missing piece is that young people need to be a little bit more taking the mindset of the business owner, think like a business owner. And actually, Sandy, I have to send you this article. I was actually recently quoted in Forbes on this very topic.
Nice.
And this idea, I know that was pretty awesome. Shout out to my colleague, Maria Ross, who actually asked for the quote. So thank you, Maria. And her work is incredible around empathy and the business benefit to empathy. And if I haven't already connected you, I must. But this whole concept and what I spoke about in the Forbes piece was that young people really need to take the ownership and think like a business owner. Do not expect the business owner to just out of the blue, take you on your word and just sort of bring you on and give you everything you want and need without sort of like proving your case. You've got to sort of develop a little bit of, and again, this may be the daughter of a sergeant major coming out in me, bear with me, but you've got to develop a little bit more of that, if you will, thick skin. Know that you've got to show what value you can add. And that's a wonderful opportunity. What a great challenge for today's young people. And they do rise to that occasion. So if they have a better sense of what the employer values, whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, what actually adds value in addition to obviously contributing to profit. But we know that some roles aren't directly profit generating, but those that can kind of free up those key business leaders to bring in more business is still incredibly valuable. So young people really need to get a little bit more tuned in to thinking like a business and imagining what they could do to offer concrete value. And you know what? They do deserve to get feedback because as we know, they're earlier on in their career, they will do better. So I'm talking now to the employers. They will do better. Young people will do better for you if you can build in time to provide frequent, and I'm not saying just positive feedback. I'm talking like real deal, authentic. Tell me what's working, what's not working, what I could do better. Can I shadow you? Can I learn? Give me the feedback so that I can add more value to your company. And I think that will bring I know we say to, young people and employers in a way they really will benefit each other for the long haul. Even if they end up bouncing around, they will when you add value to yourself, you add value to your company, right? Which is why I know you're in this work, Sandy. I mean, like you're doing the training. And I heard, I meant to quote you because I loved the quote when I was listening to one of your other podcasts, but it was something about, I'm paraphrasing, like, when you invest in yourself, when you invest in your people, you're investing in profit. I think that was what it was, which I think has something to do with your book title. I hope those insights are helpful for both the employer and the young person.
I think that's really important. And I think a lot of times people are afraid to tell the young person to buckle up, buttercup, and so in that way, you and I are very similar, in that way. And, you've talked a little bit about, the book Super Shifts, by Jay, Nick, and Steve, and that's a big influence. What's one principle from that book you've applied into your internship programs, and what difference has it made?
Well, I think just the fact that like the ground is moving beneath us, right? And this is a big chunk of a book. Big shout out! I know Janae, Dwayne, and Steve Fisher. You guys are amazing. They've written a previous book that was influential in terms of my business development. But the tagline here is transforming how we live, learn, and work in the age of intelligence. Mm-hmm. So it's like really being able to harness what is changing so rapidly and to just be constantly open to exploring the changes. And rather than be, let's say, rolled over by AI, let's learn enough to be dangerous. You don't need to be an expert. You can certainly bring people, surround yourself with people that know more than you. That's, as you know, a critical aspect of building an organization. But I think this idea of super shifts, as they call the book, is so powerful. And I think it helps, in terms of how I brought it into my work. I would say that, it's a little overused, but the only thing constant is change. So just expect and plan for change. Okay. And for young people in particular, I think this is really important. I think they like to feel, who doesn't like to feel like somewhat stable and they have a sense of what's coming? But hello, right? You plan and life happens. So I think for young people in particular, this idea of super shifts is like, life is just constantly changing all the time. So expect it and plan for it. And how are you going to, pick a niche? They say there's riches and niches. Pick a niche. Especially our young people are often, I'm not saying every young person, but they're drawn to technology. They're drawn, they were born into, they're called digital natives for a reason. So it's like, harness that and take that, let's say, to add value to your employer. If you can help your employer, my young people, if you guys can help them automate key systems or even rework their workflows, right? Or even create workflows that may not even exist. They may have them here. But if you guys can help them create systems that they can scale, so through your thought process improvement, creating or upgrading their workflows, automation, obviously AI integration, you guys will never be out of work. And the companies, like, they want and need you to bring that value to them. You just need to make sure that they know you, like you, trust you, because they're not just going to give you the keys to their kingdom that they've worked so hard to build if they don't know you, like you, trust you. Who are you? What do you stand for? And then show me. Let's do a short-term project. That's why project-based internship are, I'm biased, being a project management professional and an internship specialist. Like, this is for both. Project-based, which is inherently short-term. So interns come and go by definitions and projects start and stop. What a perfect way for both to come together. Prove the value that you're adding through some kind of project. Propose the project. My young people, most of my jobs that I've ever had, and I'm going to show you my list. You guys, I show this to you at the conference. It's so fun. This is my visual of all the different positions I've held since college. About 1/3 of these were actually posted job descriptions. So get creative, have a conversation, listen. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, even though I've been on a tirade today. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We need to listen more than we speak, especially early career, where you want to be perceptive, figure out what's needed, innovate. Pitch something. It could literally become your next job. And I have so many examples to show and people that you can talk to for examples, you guys. But if you're a young person thinking, oh my gosh, no one's hiring, no one's getting back to me. Well, keep applying online. And that's not sufficient today. So those, I hope, are some insights. I know I went, especially, I went into my I went into my coaching mode for young people. See, I just get away from it. All right. So back to Sandy.
But that's the value, right? That's the value. And that's what I think employers need to hear. And employers, anyone who's listening, this can relate to wherever you are in the organization, whether you're looking or whether you're thinking about what do young people need as they come into the organization, right? Oh, we could go on and on and on. And this conversation has been so inspiring. I love it. From my early days in Massachusetts to going to Texas to building Vision Internships into really what I consider a purpose-driven powerhouse. I mean, so before we wrap up, what's one final piece of advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with as they navigate through their own leadership journeys?
Well, I'd say for all ages, and I was on another podcast recently, I'm going to say the same thing, even though there's so many Amyisms, as one of my students called them, that I could share. But I definitely want to highlight practice makes progress, not necessarily perfection. And so to strive for progress over perfection and enjoy your life.
I love that. Oh, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your stories, your wisdom. And for those tuning in, you can connect with Amy Mosher Berry and learn more about Vision Internships at visioninternships.com.
And it's find her at S, my dear. It's Visions with an S. It's been a marketing nightmare, but just so people, it's Visions with an S, internships with an S.com.
I love it. I know I had the same problem with Human Power Solutions as well. Yep. It's crazy. And you can find her on LinkedIn at Amy Mosher Berry. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating, and share it with someone who could also use a paycheck with a purpose. Until next time, I'm Sandra Coker, and this is the People Profit Podcast, empowering you to lead with purpose and profit. Take care. That's a wrap on this episode of the People Profit Podcast. If you found a nugget of wisdom or even just a spark of inspiration, share the love, subscribe, leave us a review, and pass the episode along to a colleague who's ready to build a people-first culture. Big thanks to our sponsor, Human Power Solutions, for championing workplace where humans thrive and profits rise. Want to learn how they can energize your team? Head over to hpowersolutions.com to get started. I'm Sandra Coker, reminding you that when you invest in people, you invest in profit. See you next time.